911, where's your emergency?
I need an ambulance right away. My son just overdosed on heroin.
What's your address?
Please.
What's your...
He's unconscious. Please, hurry.
Okay, stay on the phone with me, okay?
Okay. Please, hurry. Please, hurry.
Is he breathing?
I don't know. David, why isn't he breathing? Yes, but I can't wake him up. Please hurry.
Stay on the phone with me. Stay on the phone with me, okay?
Okay.
Get the ambulance going. Just stay on the phone, okay? You said it's overdose on heroin, right?
Yes.
Okay, how old is he?
He's 21. Oh my God.
Growing up in Northeast Ohio, I had a simple life. I went to a small school, played sports, and played the trombone and band. Just a small town kid, not much going on. To pursue the American dream, I went to college, married my loving wife, and started a photography business as well as an independent video production company. We were blessed with a daughter in 2015 and a son in 2017. Things were great. However, during this time, something began lurking in the backyards of our neighborhood. It crept in like a plague that began to devour some dear friends and change the face of our communities. My whole life, I had been blissfully removed and ignorant from the secret society that before now has been gathering behind closed doors and rundown houses in dark corners of street alleys. What is this epidemic that is causing so much destruction? Heroin? Really? A drug addiction can cause this much havoc? How is this possible? As this disease began its invasion into our communities, I was faced with a harsh, dark reality as an unsettling conflict began stirring in my inner core. Should I just shut my door and continue on and remain ignorant of this epidemic consuming our world? Why should I care? It hasn't personally affected me, so what can I do about it? If I shut my eyes, will I be far removed as someone else takes care of the problem? Could I live with myself if I didn't put 1 ounce of effort toward dealing with this problem? Besides, we're all called to help others in need, right? What credibility do I have that would even make a mark on this crisis? Having now been faced with this reality, I knew I was going to have to make a choice, as doing nothing was not an option. I chose to confront and help with this problem in any way that I could, and so began my search and investigation into this peculiar world of heroin. I decided to do extensive research to expose the elements that make up this epidemic and search to find a stable cure. How did it start? Who are these people that use heroin? What exactly is heroin and how can it cause this much wreckage? The answers I've found have changed the way I look at the world and provided valuable insight into the people living their daily lives who overcame heroin addiction. What is heroin? According to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, heroin is an opioid drug made from morphine, a natural substance taken from the seed pod of the various opium poppy plants grown in Southeast and Southwest Asia, Mexico, and Colombia. Heroin can be a white or brown powder or a black sticky substance known as black tar heroin. Other common names for heroin include Big H, horse, hell dust, and smack. Prescription opioid pain medicines such as Oxycontin and Vicodin have effects similar to heroin. Research suggests that misuse of these drugs may open the door to heroin use. Nearly 80% of Americans using heroin, including those in treatment, reported misusing prescription opioids first. However, according to national surveys, less than 4% of people who had misused prescription pain medication started using heroin within 5 years. This suggests that prescription opioid misuse is just one small factor leading to heroin use. The use of heroin includes injecting, snorting, or smoking. Some people mix heroin with crack cocaine, a practice called speedballing. Heroin enters the brain rapidly and binds to opioid receptors on cells located in many areas, especially those involved in feelings of pain and pleasure, and in controlling heart rate, sleeping, and breathing. Some short-term effects include a rush of euphoria, as well as dry mouth, warm flushing of the skin, nausea, severe itching, in a back and forth state of consciousness. After a period of long-term use, people may develop insomnia, collapsed veins for those who inject, damaged nostril tissue for those who snort, infection of the heart lining and valves, constipation and stomach cramping, mental disorders such as depression and antisocial personality disorder. Heroin is highly addictive. People who regularly use heroin often develop a tolerance, which means that they need higher and or more frequent doses of the drug to get the desired effect. Those who are addicted to heroin and stop using the drug abruptly may have severe withdrawal. Withdrawal symptoms, which can begin as early as a few hours after the drug was last taken, include restlessness, severe muscle and bone pain, diarrhea and vomiting, cold flashes, uncontrollable leg movements, and severe cravings for heroin. Studies have shown some loss of the brain's white matter associated with heroin use, which may affect decision-making, behavior control, and responses to stressful situations. Furthermore, many users of heroin can easily overdose on the drug if they take enough of the drug to produce a life-threatening reaction or death. Also, heroin is now being mixed with fentanyl and carfentanil. These two synthetic cousins of heroin are very powerful, as carfentanil is 100 times more powerful than heroin. When people overdose on heroin, their breathing often slows or stops. This can decrease the amount of oxygen that reaches the brain, a condition called hypoxia. Hypoxia can have short and long-term mental effects and effects on the nervous system, including coma and permanent brain damage. An overdose can be reversed by naloxone or Narcan, which is a medicine that can treat opioid overdose when given right away. It works by rapidly binding to opioid receptors and blocking the effects of heroin and other opioid drugs. Sometimes more than one dose may be needed to help a person start breathing again. Now armed with a new understanding, I began my search into this dark, secret world to understand the people who are using heroin and to answer the questions that I and many others have. So just how bad is this epidemic?
There's been a surge in deaths from heroin addiction across the UK. Last year, there was a death from heroin or morphine abuse every 5 hours.
Killing at least 91 people every day. We are on the front lines of a battle being lost.
The Trumbull County Mental Health and Recovery Board says that in addition to the 34 overdoses this week, the numbers for the month continue to be alarming.
He was lying on his back, fully unconscious, while the woman had her face to the ground.
I joined forces with John Smith, a language arts teacher and published author from East Liverpool, and Josh Lytle, Vice President of Family Care Ministries, to fully cover all sides of this epidemic. We decided to start at the front lines, East Liverpool, Ohio, to find the point of beginning of this epidemic. We talked with those who are combating this issue on the streets and the officials in law enforcement and pharmaceuticals. Our search concluded after discovering a key landmark that has been the gateway for most of the United States.
I've obviously seen an increase of our, Subutex, Suboxone. 5 years ago, it was ridiculous the amount of opiates that were written for in this area. Thankfully, as far as the epidemic goes, we're seeing the prescriptions come down. Everything's becoming national news now, but I think as far as the prescription opiates, it was worse, and that is actually on a downside. And unfortunately, we're now getting the press from, that transition, people transitioning from that opiate to the harder, from the prescription opiate to the street opiate, and whether it be heroin, the heroin fentanyl or carfentanil. Whereas prescription drug abuse is not a good idea. At least the quality is controlled. In some ways, we're making steps in the right direction. Those steps are also opening the door of that being the easier option, is going to the street.
11 reported overdoses in 24 hours. It's a stunning development that has officials in East Liverpool, Wellsville, and Chester scrambling.
I think the smaller towns are getting people from the bigger cities. They moved in here. Maybe they have a friend, they have relatives. They're meeting people at college, and then when they come back with them, and all these things have happened here, and they set up shop here, and they start selling, Next thing you know, they got a girl pregnant. Now they're tied in here, and you just never get rid of the drug problem. It seems like the punishments, when you finally catch these people, and the punishments don't match with the crime, because they're basically destroying your communities. They're tearing families apart.
I've been on 18 years, so I've seen, just about everything there is. East Liverpool is like a mini New York at times. We've had everything from triple homicides to, to assaults to what have you. We've had it all. But the ODs that are happening now, that's all new, for us. I'm sure it happened before, but it was so far and in between that you didn't really notice that. It was odd that somebody was sick and OD'd, or you find out that they OD'd on drugs, a mixed combination of drugs more than anything. But today, 2-3 times a day.
What I hear are, that the drug manufacturers are responsible, and it's, it's the whole, McDonald's, French fries are responsible for obesity. It's not just the drug manufacturers, it's a little bit of everybody's responsibility. What we see happens is somebody gets hurt at work. They go to the doctor. They say, I pulled a muscle in my back. I need to get back to work tomorrow. Doctor gives them a muscle relaxer, gives them a pain pill. Guy goes home, he takes that. He's like, I'm ready to go back to work tomorrow. He goes back to work tomorrow. You do that long enough, and you're going to be addicted to that medicine, okay? So, whose fault is that? Is that the manufacturer's fault? I don't think so. They're just making something to make the pain go away, People blame the doctors. Is it the doctor's fault? No, the doctor's just trying to help you, Is it the patient's fault? No, he just wants to go back to work. So it's a real sketchy situation. There's not one entity that is responsible. Nobody growing up says, hey, I want to grow up and be a drug addict.
This house we just passed back here, it doesn't look like anything. It's a nice looking house in the neighborhood. But one of their children has died 8 times, ODing. That's no exaggeration, 8 times. Brought him back every time.
When we get, first responders, ourselves and EMS get called to an overdose, the scenes aren't what they used to be. I think it's very important to note that, addiction doesn't discriminate. Something that may have been popular years ago in the poorer parts of the city, you can find in grandma's house or, the nicest house on the block. So I think, not knowing where exactly you're walking into, what to see, it's always unexpected. You never know. It could be the same house 3 times in a week, or it could be, the local librarian. You never know.
Friday night in East Liverpool, undercover officer Chris Green accidentally overdosed on what is suspected to be fentanyl and carfentanil.
Within the last 1.5 to 2 years, we're getting all these warnings from the CDCA, the DEA, the Drug Task Force, these high-level professionals, the doctors. We've had to change out from latex gloves to nitrile gloves because they're saying that, some of the stuff is so powerful that it's going through or can penetrate latex gloves. We just stumbled across an article today that some of this fentanyl may be Narcan resistant. I recently experienced an issue where it either went through my skin or I was exposed, either through the nose, the mouth, or the eyes. At some point I was exposed. And it's a real threat. I fear that more than being shot or stabbed. Obviously, as I'm walking to a car, I'm initially looking for a gun, but it's not far-fetched for one of these guys to throw something in my face or another officer or purposely poison our canine, sprinkle some, near where the canine's going to be as they're sniffing the car. And you truly don't know if you're coming home at night.
We can train family members. We have, not a lot, but we have some family members that will come in and they'll say, hey, you know what? We know little Johnny is going to use too much one of these days, and, the ambulance might not get there in time, so we want to have some Narcan. So it sets up this whole it sets up this whole scenario where it's okay. Don't worry about overdosing. We got you covered. You know, go ahead, use as much as you want. You know, if you use too much, we'll just give you a shot of Narcan and, you know, you're not going to die.
Now, I mean, like I said, heroin is so accessible and the doses are so much more lethal. I mean, you know, it's to the max, you know, and it's hardly, Narcan these days, it's hardly touching or hardly getting them breathing again, hardly getting them back. So when you're dealing with something that lethal, such a small dose, when it, you know, comes in contact with us first responders, can knock us on our butts. And you don't always know if it's just heroin you're dealing with. They cut, they mix with anything these days. So, I mean, the dangers are unlimited and most of the time unknown.
Now to the shocking photos released by an Ohio police department to show the impact of the exploding heroin epidemic on children. Earlier this week, we told you about hundreds of overdoses in a couple of weeks in the Cincinnati area. Now, these photos from the other side of the state, adults unconscious and incoherent in the front seats with a child in the back.
I truly believe that had we not done some of the things that we've done, the problem would have probably gotten worse here.
And I think when we release that picture, it forces people to take notice. Even though they want to just focus, it's just here, it's not, it's everywhere. If you're not going to do anything to fix it, it's definitely people are going to continue to die, and they'll just continue to spiral out of control.
The drug issue has been one of the key issues that we've had to deal with since I started in office in 2014, and even prior to that. I know there's a lot of history, of course, with the drug problems here in the state of Ohio, but we have definitely seen an escalation, especially in the area of opioid abuse. And my aide was just commenting to me on the phone 2 days ago that we've had a series of meetings on district during the summer break, and regardless of the topic or the subject of the meeting, heroin abuse or opioid abuse has come into that discussion, regardless of what the meeting was about. And so we see that it's predominant. It is a dominating theme. It is not only consuming the lives of individuals, it's actually beginning to consume the focus of government because it is out of control.
Such an important landmark here, the point of beginning, the place where everything west of the Ohio River is based off of. From this point in East Liverpool, Ohio to California, from Alabama to Washington, every township, every county is based off of this point right here. The point of beginnings represents where families were able to purchase their own property, make something their own home, make it very special to them, something that they raised their family in and could call their own, something that meant a whole lot to them. And just like each and every individual, there's a point of beginning for each one of us that we can begin to look at our life as something that's valuable and special, that's something that we can really take pride in and see a change.
We all know the people who actually use heroin, right? You know, the junkies hiding in dark alleys or abandoned houses, shooting up in private away from society, or those tattooed weirdos with a bunch of piercings that have nothing better to do with their lives. Or even better yet, rock stars living the dream, partying all day and every night. Those are the people using heroin, not my neighbor Johnny that lives 2 houses down, or that sweet girl who is well off with an incredible family who does anything for anybody, or the son of the preacher who is a key figure in the community. No, not them. Who was the face of the heroin epidemic? How did they start? How can someone make a decision that ultimately alters their life and the lives of those that surround them? How bad was their addiction, and what are the lengths that they went to in order to satisfy that never-ending urge to use? How could they turn away from those that they love? I had my own view of heroin addicts, just like you. Being closed off and simple-minded toward them has served me well my whole life. So again, why should I care? It wasn't until I had the opportunity to hear the stories of the individuals who battled with heroin addiction for many years that changed my entire perception on the addiction.
We had a good home, man. I had a really good relationship with my dad, great parents, you know, definitely a Christian household. You know, you didn't see alcohol, you didn't see drugs, smoking, and just thought it was the norm, you know, growing up. So we had a blast. We loved sports. We were competitive, wrestling around, in the living room. And it was a great home growing up. Felt very loved, very taken care of.
Yeah, I called him my boo-boo baby because he was always getting hurt and always crying about something. That's little, like 2 years old. Yeah. But then as he got older, he was a kid who always made everybody laugh.
It was a good life. I was raised by a single dad, single parent. He was a truck driver, so he did the best he could to raise 3 boys, the best he knew how to. He wasn't home a lot, and that led us to our own devices, but he raised us good, It was a good home. We didn't want for nothing. His big thing was to graduate school. That was his. If we did good in school, it was all right with him.
I got married young, and I went to work. I paid my bills. I had my own place. Worked since the age of 12. My dad gave me a good work ethic, and it was going good, or at least what I thought was good. My marriage was a little rocky at the time, but nothing that would have led me to think anything crazy.
At the bus stop, you have different people coming from different neighborhoods, and we would do like a little intramural time, ourselves. We just set it up. We'd play football or basketball and just all meet 30 minutes early before we got on the bus and went to school. And some of those kids would bring parents cigarettes or something like that. And I'm looking at a 10, 11-year-old kid at the time, and these kids are doing that, and I'd watch them, and they didn't even come my way because they knew my dad was a preacher, and I was supposed to be the good kid and all that, and I kind of made me feel like, oh, why am I being left out? Even though I didn't necessarily want to do it, it was just the fact that I felt left out. And so I had that feeling of just, man, I don't want to be singled out from anyone. I just want to fit in. I was that chameleon that just kind of blended with whatever crowd I went with. So it was about then I started getting those uneasy feelings, like, what would I do if they handed it to me? And one day they did. Just reached out a cigarette like this, and honestly, I didn't even know what to do. But I watched them and did it and coughed my head off, and it was dumb, but I got that acceptance. And that's when I started knowing that felt good to me. And that took me down a very long spiral of a lot of years of bad choices.
As he was growing up, he tended to get more isolated from the family. Mm-hmm. He was into more of his friends and doing things like that. And even when he was a little bit older, he was playing football, in middle school. And he even asked me, don't even show up on my motorcycle wearing my Christian patches on my vest that I would ride. He started to get real fussy about the Christian faith, and because he was embarrassed by it.
My back was hurting a little bit from work, and I come home and I said, hey, we got some ibuprofen. I'd asked my wife, and she said, no, let me ask my mom. And her mom said, no, but I got these Percocet, and I'd never taken anything in my life, so I didn't really know what it was. Well, I took it and laid down, like you would take a Tylenol or something, and about 10 minutes, man, I was just huge euphoria. I felt absolutely amazing, so that was pretty much my first run-in with anything.
I was at a buddy's house, and his dad was at work, and we broke into his dad's room and got in his closet, and we stole his dad's marijuana and a pipe and used it to smoke it and everything, and ended up getting high and everything. And then later that night, we were so young actually that his dad had a bottle of liquor at the top of the cabinet. And on top of the cabinet, we had to climb up on the cabinets to even get to it. That's how young and short we were. And we stole a bottle of peach schnapps and drank it, and ended up getting drunk and all messed up and getting in trouble, busted a window out. His dad came home, and so wasn't happy.
First time I ever used heroin, I didn't know what it was. I was drinking. I was smoking weed. I was a man that was pretty messed up. I would take pills. I would do a lot of things, but I never felt like I was addicted. I looked at someone that did heroin and cocaine and thought, these people are bound, they're weak. I also liked the gym at that time, so I kind of tried to balance this life. And we were drinking, and at a friend's house, his brother-in-law was older, and they would let us go to his house. Everyone always has that spot you go to, and he put a line on the table and said, hey, man, here you go. And I just thought maybe it was a pill. I didn't know what it was. I wasn't doing right at the time. I remember snorting that up my nose, and the next thing I remember, I was on a back road in my truck. It was still running. I don't know if someone took me there and dropped me off, but it was morning. And I remember sitting up and feeling like I was going to die. I thought my head was going to explode. I was pulling over and throwing up. I almost didn't make it home. And I thought, man, I don't know what that was. And I found out down the road that was heroin. And, you know, you wouldn't think anybody would want to go back to that or why. But it was just the curiosity of, is that really what that was? But that was the first time I ever tried heroin. I didn't even know that that's what it was. Somebody just put it on the table and said, here you go.
All right, it was at the age of 9 that I tried my very first cigarette. I remember stealing it out of my mom's carton on the top of the refrigerator and taking it to the woods and trying it for my very first time. And to be honest with you, I was just trying to fit in. Everyone else was doing it, so why shouldn't I? And shortly after that, I tried marijuana when I was in 7th grade, and then I drank alcohol for my first time then also.
Well, I grew up in church. I grew up with a Christian family. My family raised me the right way. But after high school, I just gave into the pressures of everybody that was around me. I started college and I started drinking, and it was a completely normal thing to me. I went to frat parties, I went out to bars, and I got drunk, and that was when I was 18. And one of those times when I got drunk, I was at a bar in my hometown, and that night I was slipped a date rape drug. And that night I was raped, and to me as an 18-year-old girl, that was my worst case scenario. I had no coping skills. I didn't know how to deal with it. And so I just continued to drink because it numbed my emotions. And one time when I was intoxicated, a guy that I knew was using drugs, and I was already intoxicated, so I just used drugs for the first time. And I didn't really think anything about it because I was just partying. It wasn't a big deal. And then all of a sudden, something that started out as a partying thing that was a random thing became an everyday thing. And I don't really remember when that switch occurred from just a party thing to a complete addiction, but I know that one day I couldn't remember the last time I went a day without a drug, and I knew I was bound and I was hopeless.
By taking those painkillers every now and then, you know, I'd get a few from people because I enjoyed that feeling, and I didn't see an issue with it because it was medicine in my eyes, you know. I guess I was naive. Then one day I got real sick, couldn't get out of bed, curled up in a ball, and my wife at the time had called my mother and explained to her what was going on. I was sick, and she said, well, I heard he's been taking these pills. She said, do you have any? She said, yes. She said, well, give him one. And she gave me one, and within about 10 minutes, something like that, man, I was up and moving and feeling great. And I talked to my mom on the phone after that, and that's when I knew I was in trouble.
Honestly, I used to look down on people that used heroin because I was using pills, and I guess it was, in my mind, was better to use pills than even use heroin and everything, but that's what I got fully addicted to, opiates, and it just, pills got so expensive. Heroin was a lot cheaper, and you could get, and I've noticed friends doing it and getting seemed like so much higher, and that's when it led to me using heroin and finding it, and at first I would never use a needle doing it or anything like that because I honestly looked down upon that. But when that comes a money issue, you start thinking you can use less by using a needle, and then like you start using that needle, and once that's, you do wake up. You go to bed searching for it before you even wake up, because if you ain't got it when you wake up, you're feeling awful to the point where it controls everything.
I knew that he did drugs just because I heard, but I didn't know how bad it was. And the night that we got together, I actually got pregnant with our son. So, I couldn't just run away when I found out everything. It was almost like being stuck, honestly.
My addiction continued to get worse. I just tried anything that people would put in front of me. And then at the age of 14, I did the thing that I said I would never do. I stuck a needle in my arm for the very first time. And that was when I tried Oxycontin. I remember searching for that same high every day after that. I wanted that same feeling again, but I never could find it again.
I was that prideful person that never thought I was going to be that guy. I had a friend that was a heroin addict, that he would overdose. He would be purple. We'd throw him in a shower and have to throw ice under his arms and try to get him to, take a breath and wake up. It was our version of Narcan, I guess you could say, just to try to shock them to breathe again. And I never wanted to be that. I always thought that was disgusting. And I remember I was having a real bad time with the decisions I was making and looking like a failure in my family's eyes. And just, again, I was at that same place that I could not find that feeling of affirmation that I longed for so much, that I looked for in bottles and weed and pills. And I'll never forget it. It was at Permane Brothers parking lot in Robinson, Pennsylvania. And that same man that I looked at so many times and watched almost die, almost breathe his last breath, filled a syringe up with heroin. And we rolled my sleeve up right here. And I'll never forget it, man. I put my arm out, and he started to put this needle in my arm. And I turned my head, and when I looked back, blood popped back into that syringe, and he forced that drug into my body. And I loved it. I didn't have to think. I didn't have to fit in. I didn't have to worry about anything. And it was like, whew, this feeling that I've been looking for so long, I don't care about it no more. And it grabbed me to the point where I loved it. And so I knew that I'd crossed the line. I was at a point where I didn't think there was change. I didn't think it was going to be possible. From that first day, it was on. As soon as he put that needle in my arm, it was years and years and years. There was no stopping. There was no thought in my mind that I would stop, that I could stop. And then I remember the first time I tried to, I said, you know what, I'm just getting tired of chasing this. And I went to get up in the morning and go on, and I couldn't function. I was curled up in a ball like a baby. I was sweating, but I was hot. I was sick. I tried to take a drink of water, and it would just come right back up. And I didn't even know what people call dope sickness. I didn't know what that was. It's the worst feeling I ever felt in my life. And that feeling caused me to do some pretty horrible things in my life, to my family, to people that I love, to people that I didn't know, to strangers. It caused me, it put a drive in me to never feel that feeling. And after 3 or 4 hours without drugs, mentally I would start feeling that feeling. And so it consumed my life every day, all day.
I think it was a total shock. I knew that he drank occasionally, and I can remember we would be in bed when he'd come home, and I'd always get out of bed and go and hug him to see what I could smell on him, and he would always hold his breath when I hugged him. But I think I was in denial for a long time, not wanting to believe that he was actually doing the things that he was doing. And then I think I just kind of hardened myself because I didn't want to think that my son could do those kind of things. But he turned into somebody that was different than who he had been. So
most of the time when you get the painkillers, it would be somebody that gets them monthly and or at the beginning of the month, and they would run out and they'd get really hard to find. And when you couldn't find any, somebody had introduced me and they said, hey man, it's the same thing. It does the same exact thing as painkillers do. So I said, okay, let me try it. I was sick. And I took it and I tried it, and they were absolutely right. It was the same exact thing, and I wasn't sick anymore.
Watching one of my best friends I grew up with OD from using heroin, and I rushed him to the hospital. Luckily, we were an exit away from the hospital, but it's someone I grew up with my whole entire life and was one of my best friends. My first thought was, while he was passed out, was to rob him and to steal his money. And when I dropped him off at the hospital, I left there immediately and went back and bought the same exact heroin that he just OD'd on, because I knew it was good. And to me, after I went home and did it and everything, started thinking about it, the emotions that came with it was despair, agony, desperation, depression, thinking like I just did this to my best friend, having a son, thinking that could have easily been me and he'd never know who his dad was at all.
I was more angry than anything at him at that point. There was a point where, sadness left. It was like, I can't take it anymore. I've asked him numerous times to get help and he wouldn't do it. I would put our son in his face and it didn't matter. It seemed like he had a life outside of this home. I was here trying to raise our son and he was out partying.
If I had $2,000 in my pocket, it went to drugs. If I had $50 in my pocket, it went to drugs. It just basically was depending on how much money I could get. There was days where I seriously had $4,000 in my pocket, and the next morning I had nothing. I couldn't even have money to buy food. So as much as I could feed, that's as much as I spent. On average, at least $100 a day or more, minimum. And you go to certain places that you know to go, and you can get a decent amount of heroin for $4. So, you know, it's set up to where you can stay high for pretty cheap. So if you're spending $100, that's enough to kill several people, you know. And but it was as much as you could do, knowing that this could be your last time that you put a needle in your arm. You may not wake up again, and you know that, but you're so bound, you're so hopeless, you just get to the point we don't care anymore.
There was a real struggle that went on with us because, you know, as he started to really go away, we found out a lot of things. We didn't understand what we understood Christian love and what it was, but we didn't understand what enabling was. And so, in the name of Christian love, we enabled our son. I became codependent with him, thinking that I could control him. I would do that. I would make it happen. And because of that, it just naturally, it made me worse of a person, you know, than I should be, even in my Christian faith. And so there began to be a real struggle and a real battle. I mean, there was so much anger. I used to beg him, even when it got bad, just reach out and punch me. Just punch me. I just wanted a reason just to tear, because he was too messed up to do anything back, you know, and I just wanted to beat him. I just thought if I'd beat him really bad, that he would catch on. And yet, at times, there was, you know, he'd back off a little bit, and he'd become that wonderful son again, you know, and then it was always back. He always went back.
My daily life consisted of, for a long time, waking up, usually sick. I'd set some dope aside in the evening and say I'm not going to touch it. That's so I'm not sick in the morning, but I'd always end up doing it. And so I'd wake up sick and scheming in my mind. What can I do? What can I do to get some money? What can I do to get dope? It was rough. It was a nasty thing.
I have to admit that I didn't notice it at first, and that's one of the hardest parts for me. Because John was my best friend. And I had a lot of guilt of not knowing where he was going in life, because I was newly married, had my own marriage problems, and very overprotective. So sometimes I feel like I'm a little at fault because he was my best friend growing up, and sometimes I felt like it was my fault. Like I should have caught it, and I should have prevented it somehow.
But I would lay at night and I would cry. I would hear them crying and I would cry. I hated the fact that I was hurting my family, but I just didn't see a way out of it. I didn't think there was any hope to be different. And when you're laying in a basement and you're so sick and you've been laying there for 3 days, you haven't eaten, you haven't drank, and you're just hoping that this feeling goes away, and it doesn't. You know, and that thought in your mind of there's something here that I could take, you know, to get a little bit of money just to make this feeling go away. And then I can talk to him and say, hey, I'm sorry. And at that point, it would be too late. You know, and then you would have to do more drugs to numb yourself because you knew you were a failure. You could see it in their eyes. I knew what my dad looking at me on that football field or wrestling. I knew that sense of proud as a dad, you know, to look at me and say, man, good job, buddy. Or when I got saved at a young age and, you know, he looks at you very proud. I remember I was on a slip and slide and I broke my foot as a young man. And I crawled home on my hands and knees, and my dad was in his suit being a preacher, and he seen me. And he ran down and he scooped me up in his suit, and he's getting all wet and grass and dirt all over him, and he ran me up on the porch and just hugged me like that, you know. And I remember seeing that look in his eyes. I loved that. As a growing man, I still wanted that. And I knew that I was making that impossible, and it killed me. And so that was the reason, that was another main reason that I just said, I have to stay numb. I have to. Now, I can't look at my dad and know that that's not there anymore. You know, that feeling's not there anymore. That they're just disgusted with my life and my choices. It just killed me. Killed me that I had to wear long sleeves in the middle of the summer. It killed me that I had veins that were blown out in my arms. It just killed me that they had to come from car wreck after car wreck after car wreck and pick me up. And it killed me that they had to answer the phone. I got to the point where I would call from jail when I got arrested. And I would say, I don't want you to panic. I just want to let you know where I'm at so you guys can sleep tonight. You can actually get a good night's rest. And I would go in my jail cell and weep like a baby. No one would see me. I'd made sure of that. But I would weep like a baby in there because I loved my family. You know, it killed me when I would call them on Thanksgiving incarcerated, and I was eating a green bologna sandwich, and I'm hearing the customs of Thanksgiving in the background. I can hear it, and I know that they're cutting the gizzard that we would argue over and stuff like that with my uncle and comparing deer horns. And I'm going back to a cell with a steel door with two other men that's sitting in a room that's no bigger than my bathroom. You know, it killed me. But I just thought, man, I've done too much, and this is just the life that I'm going to live now.
We just realized there was nothing we could do. Nothing we could do. And I mean, we was praying, and we thought in prayer, that prayer would just make it automatically happen. And it didn't. And even talking with people because I went to counseling, to get counseling and get help, you know, to deal with the whole situation. Had people tell me, and you know, one day you might have to put your son out of your house. And I said, I never do that. I love my son. He's my son. It doesn't matter what he does. I'm always going to love him, which I always did. But it came to the point when it was hopeless there was always something missing from the home. Something was always, maybe it was my guns, maybe it was money, maybe it was checks out of a checkbook. All that stuff was always happening. So we had to come to a place where, you know, I just through a lot of prayer and soul searching, that if I really, really, really did love him, I had to practice something my mother practiced with me when I was young. And I took him to the door and told him that I remember telling him I loved him, but I had to put him out of my house according to Scripture. Actually, turn him over to Satan for the destruction of his flesh, but for the salvation of his soul, because I was more concerned with him being able to have an eternity in heaven than being messed up in his life for the rest of his life and spend eternity in hell. That's when I knew I was broken. There was nothing left in me. We cried for weeks on our bed. Just cried and wept for our son. It wasn't our son. Drugs changed him. You know, physically, mentally, emotionally. They completely altered everything in his life and made him a man that we was ashamed of. We was embarrassed. We blamed ourselves. We went through all kind of things.
Would be living at my parents', obviously, because I've lost everything I own to the addiction, and stealing out of my daughter's piggy bank that my parents had been putting money into. And I knew, you know, that my sister or my parents would slip dollars in there, or my brother-in-law, and you know, just so desperate not to be sick, man. And I couldn't go steal, and everybody already had their purses and everything else hid from me. So, you know, that it was there, it was money, it was accessible, and taking that money from my own child, you know, that was a pretty low point in my life. I ended up in the jail for stealing a cell phone, my mother's cell phone, and I stole it so I could call the dope man for no other reason. I had broken into my sister's house probably a week prior to that and stole all the presents out from under her Christmas tree and opened them up to, I knew there was electronics, I knew there was going to be something I could get some money out of. You know, my plan was pretty much to get high when I got out of jail and until I ran out of money, and then do enough dope to end it. You know, it's rough on your family, man, your kids. You don't want your daughter to, you know, say, yeah, my dad's a junkie, you know.
My addiction took me places that I never thought it would. It made me a person I never wanted to be, and I felt just completely hopeless and bound to this drug addiction. I needed it to wake up. I needed it to go to work. I needed it to talk to people, and I was sick without it. I went through physical withdrawals anytime I tried to quit, and that was the lowest point for me, is when I could see the hurt on my family's faces. They found out about my addiction. My mom would cry herself to sleep. She begged me to quit, and I couldn't. I wanted to. I didn't want to be an addict. You know, as a little girl, I had hopes and dreams, and it was never to be a drug addict. But here I was, and I was completely bound. And so at my lowest point, I knew that in every bad situation in my life was me. I was the common factor, and I wanted my family to be able to go on and have Thanksgiving and Christmas and to be a happy family, but I was the problem. I can't really even put into words how hopeless I was at that time in my life. I just was in a place I never thought I would be. I was a person I never thought I'd become, and I hated that person. And I didn't want my family to see me like that. I didn't want my friends to see me like that, and I didn't want to be like that. But I didn't see any way out other than taking my own life. And so that's what I tried to do. And it wasn't this really well thought out plan. It was just hey, I'm gonna do this, and this is how I'm gonna do it. And so I took a 18 Adderall 20 milligrams, and I ate them all at once, and it was completely miserable because by the time we got to the hospital, it was too late to pump my stomach, so they had to just let everything take its course on me. Only one person in my family could come into the hospital at a time, and I remember my dad, and he was holding my hand, and he just said, "Why do you want to kill my baby? You can't kill my baby. I don't want you to kill my baby." And he cried, and he's a grown man, my dad, the strongest man I know, and here he is, broke down at my hospital bed, just crying. And that's the point that I got to. That's where drugs took me. And like I said, it just started out as a partying thing. It was never supposed to take me that far.
I was on my way to school one morning. It was my senior year in high school, and I guess that I just nodded out, or I passed out behind the wheel. I was driving and I was alone, and I had my seatbelt on, which did save my life, and I crashed into the side of the road. And due to the crash, the impact, my right leg was crushed, my ankle was crushed completely. And then also after the car hit, the final hit, I fell over and my top half landed in front of the passenger airbag. And so the airbag busted into my face, and that's what caused brain damage. It busted my nose completely. My face was just completely busted open. I pretty much lost my mind after that accident. I did. And that's when I was placed on all kind of heavy meds, anxiety medication, depression medication, sleeping medication, and that's where it took me.
You need it every single day, multiple times a day. It controls you to the point if you use the bathroom, what time you wake up, if you eat that day. If I played with my son, and that was one of the worst feelings ever. Your son asking you to play with you, and you tell him you can't because you're sick. Daddy don't feel good. Daddy don't feel good at all. Daddy can't come see you today. I don't feel good. And before I ever knew anything about the Lord or God, I would pray and ask God to let me not even wake up, so I don't have to put my family or my son growing up knowing an addict. Always, I would pray that, and but it led me to a point where I was found behind the restaurant dead in a car, and the policeman came up. He called the paramedics to come and pronounce me dead before he even opened the door, because he said he would have bet everything he owned that I was dead in that car. And when the paramedics came, they opened the door, and I stood up out of it. And still to this day, I remember seeing the shock on that police officer's face. I don't remember him opening the door, but I remember standing there. And I was facing some pretty good charges, close to 3-4 years in prison, felony possession and paraphernalia like that.
We had went a couple months without seeing each other, talking to each other, and I had rededicated my life to the Lord, and God just kept telling me to love him like Jesus. And so I had him come over finally, and he walked through the door, and he was nothing but skin and bone.
sitting on the couch, nodding off. He was dirty. He wouldn't clean himself. His hair was greasy. And I knew there was more to him than that. Just seeing him in that state and not knowing if he would ever get better. I knew that God could answer my prayers, but I also knew that Anthony had a choice to make.
July 20th, 2005, I was a broken, miserable man, and my peace came from dope. My peace came from heroin, and I pulled a car over the side of the road and filled a syringe up with heroin and shot it into my arm, and was in a severe car wreck. I passed out behind the wheel and smashed into another vehicle head on, and when I came to, I was looking at the bottom of my foot. My leg was broken in half. My body was battered, and they cut my car in half with the jaws of life, and I'm laying in a hospital in Pittsburgh with doctors looking at me amazed that I'm alive, and got fake parts in my body, and I go home with the belief that this is going to be my life. I remember laying in my mom and dad's living room looking out the window. I couldn't sit up past 20 degrees and thinking, this is going to be my life. How did I get here? I have no clue how this happened. I don't know when it went from being fun to being bondage.
Why hasn't anyone done anything? We are facing a harsh reality. What do we do? Now that I have gained a better understanding of heroin and the addict, why hasn't anyone done anything? How do we treat heroin addiction? There are many rehab facilities for heroin and opioid use. Are they working? Is there a cure? The government and medication will solve this epidemic, right? After all, isn't it a disease? I feel the answers to these questions will end the epidemic and put everyone at ease because, hey, it's no longer our problem.
I had gone to a particular rehab. I'd probably been in and out of there 6 or 7 times. I'd been through a 3-quarter house and a halfway house. They didn't do anything for me. The only thing that they did for me was, in a time that I was really hard up, they gave me an out, a way to go somewhere and not be dope sick, and get a break from the running and the scheming, and get a little rest from it. The ideas behind what they would teach you, with being a drug addict the rest of your life, and attending meetings to prevent you from going out and getting high again. There's no hope in that. The only thing I could think at that point in time with what they were telling me was a disease, and this is just how it is, was, okay, let's say I get my life together and they're right, and I fight this every day. If I want to move on with my life, if I want to get married, if I want to have kids, if I want to do anything, when am I going to relapse? When am I going to falter and destroy the lives of everyone around me once again? And there was no hope in that.
It was one, you went and they gave you more drugs, which is the same exact thing. It's just more drugs, just different kind of it, it kept you an addict. And the other one, where you'd go sit in a circle, you'd go there and talk about doing drugs the whole time, about how you used to do drugs, so it made you want to do drugs. A lot of times I had to be high to just even sit through them, truthfully.
I had the opportunity several times when I was incarcerated, and people would offer it to you, and it was secular rehabs at first. And I'd seen so many of my friends come back, they had more phone numbers, more connections, and it seemed like the day they got out, a lot of times they were at my place getting drugs. And so I was real against rehabilitation, in those ways. I just didn't think it was going to work. Was it a place where I was just broken? And my family believes in the power of prayer. And a man that wasn't really supposed to ever walk normal again, they prayed for me. And they believed that my life could be different and be changed, and never went to physical therapy or anything. I was able to get up out of that hospital bed, and God gave me the strength and made fake parts that weren't supposed to work again. And so I took it for granted, though, and I got what I wanted. And so now I got prescribed pain pills and all these different things. I had a legal way to do what I wanted to do and get high. And it didn't work. It went right back down to a miserable life. Could have been gone for a very long time. And just got to a point where I was broken. And I looked around and I thought, what in the world am I doing?
I tried the Suboxone clinic, the methadone clinic, anything and everything that the world could offer. I was in Suboxone groups at my dad's, at the hospital where he worked, with a bunch of older men and women where we would sit in a circle and talk about things, Suboxone, how it had helped us, how it didn't help us. And I remember being faced with a choice. I had 3 DUIs at the age of 17 and multiple drug charges. And I was going to go to jail or I was going to go back to another rehab.
And everywhere I turned were these programs that said that I was an addict and that I'd always be an addict. And I have to say, my name's Amanda and I'm an addict. And even then I knew that that wasn't who I was. I knew that I was acting like an addict, but that wasn't the core of me. That wasn't everything about me. And I hated being identified by that.
We are now losing 144 Americans to drug overdoses. Think about that. Every single day, 144 people. By the way, that means that during the time that it takes to give these remarks, which will be about 12 minutes, on average, we're losing another American to this opioid epidemic.
I was just at a national conference and they shared that there's over $550 million that's available to programs. And the answer with that money, where it was going to go, was more Suboxone programs, more of these programs that they admitted children are still being born addicted. They're still being born withdrawn. I don't know if you've ever seen a baby withdraw, but it's absolutely horrifying.
There's a lot of treatment facilities that, if you go to, you can get like a 7-day, 14-day, 28-day supply, and you can, and you get that through, a state-funded or, program. Well, they'll take that Suboxone that they get for free, and they'll go sell it on the street, and then buy what they want, buy what their drug of choice is.
We have limited the number of Suboxone prescriptions, Subutex prescriptions that we will fill. From a business standpoint, as far, at least in the eyes of the DEA and or Ohio Board of Pharmacy, there is no set number, but we're required to keep a percentage of how much controlled substance versus non-controlled we're filling. And as that number grows higher, there's a much more scrutinous eye on us, watching us, and checking over on us at all times. The higher that percentage, the more chance of being shut down, or at least being, our services being interrupted just so they can investigate, see what's going on.
I have seen people, use Suboxone successfully. It's not a bad thing. It's just like, the pain medications. The pain medications, they're not a bad thing. Can you get addicted to them? Absolutely, but they're doing what they're supposed to do for the majority of people, and the same thing with Suboxone.
You got to fight it on all 3 fronts. You have to fight it with education, enforcement, and interdiction. And the education end starts in the school systems, works it's all, even post-school you have to have education. The enforcement end, you have to have the law enforcement officers available to fight the drug dealers themselves. And then the interdiction end, where the treatment, the teaching these people life skills and how to become productive citizens. Without those 3 things, you'll never be successful. And they all 3 equally have to be funded. And that's what we face here in this country. Depending on who's in government, they fund one or the other, or 2 of the 3. Never all 3 of them are funded equally.
Well, I think that government needs to control what government can control. And there's a role for government, but there's also a place where government has its limitations. And there is a wall that government will encounter from time to time. And I believe this epidemic is one of those walls of revelation as to the limitation of government. We are treating this problem as best we can, and we have a lot of sincere individuals and leaders who are very intelligent and are approaching this from every angle that they can possibly conceive. However, if we treat this problem, this epidemic, merely from a physical standpoint, where we view man as merely a compilation, a mass of cells, and those cells are differentiated among body parts. So we're dealing with brain cells and we're dealing with body cells. and we're dealing with emotions and we're dealing with psychology. But if we eliminate and leave out the spirit and we leave out the soul of man, then I think we're fighting this epidemic with one arm behind our back. Because what I believe is happening in many instances are individuals who are trying to meet legitimate desires and needs. They're trying to scratch an itch with illegitimate means and method. And it's something that is something that will only be satisfied, I believe, by them and government acknowledging that man has a spiritual nature and we must deal with that spirit as well.
The government a lot of times tries to treat it as a disease. They'll say that it is a disease, it's something that has to be treated, but when they say it's a disease, it also becomes something that you can charge for, you know what I mean? So it brings in a lot of funding. It brings in a lot of money for doctors and methadone clinics and Suboxone clinics that people are still nodding out the same way they would drugs. They might just not be on the streets buying the drugs. So it's the same chemical makeup. So they're basically replacing one drug with another drug, I know just as many people in the 11 years I've been doing ministry to try to help people get off of drugs. I know probably more fatal overdoses prior than the last year was from methadone and like benzo, Xanax mixed up, where we don't treat it as a disease. We say people are at a disease with themselves. They have problems, they have insecurities, they've had maybe a rough upbringing, maybe they're not comfortable in their own skin, maybe they don't make friends well, maybe they're not good at sports. There's always something. It doesn't have to be this huge traumatic thing that a lot of times we think it had to be abuse or something like that. Could just be something down to the very small point of they don't like who they are. They don't like what they see when they look in the mirror. So when they're not at ease with themselves, they want to find a way to take care of that. So when we show them their worth, their value biblically, where we show them who they can be, their potential, instead of just giving them more drugs for drugs.
The medical science and the research that shows the physiological changes that take place within the brain are real and legitimate. But I believe that when we characterize it as a disease only, we are approaching it perhaps from a perspective of weakness because we are legitimizing something. And I think by calling it a disease, we are eliminating to a certain degree the will of man, and we're eliminating their choice and responsibility. And if I come to a place where it's not my fault, that forces me as an individual into a potential position where I can make excuses for myself. And I do believe that from those that I've talked to and from all of the evidence that it is a very, very powerful addiction that actually changes the chemistry of the brain. But I think we need to rethink calling it a disease.
Of course, there may be a few who overcame heroin addiction with these methods, but what about the overwhelming majority that are still dealing with this issue? Through all the interviews and research I've conducted, I've reached the pinnacle of my search for understanding the addict and how a person can truly overcome addiction. Is there a real cure? What hope do we have to end this suffering? The stories I heard of overcoming heroin addiction and complete restoration ultimately opened my eyes to a new understanding of the addict and the renewal of humanity.
It was actually when we finally made the choice to admit in front of our church that we had a son who was in jail and who was a heroin addict, and we needed help. We couldn't do it by ourselves anymore. We needed some support. We needed some people to come around us. And we just basically broke down in front of our church and asked them to please pray for us. And afterwards, someone came up and said, "Did you ever think about this Christian-based place?" And we said we hadn't really heard about it. We thought it was for younger people. And then we started looking into it and found out that there was one not too awful far from the house.
After, he finally cried out for help and said he wanted help. And we was able to tell him the faith-based is the only help we can give you.
I'm in shackles, I'm in oranges, I'm bound at the wrist, at the waist, and my ankles all connected together. And, they told me about this place called Appalachian Teen Challenge, and they said that, you know, that they were going to teach me biblical truths, and that I didn't like any of that. What really sold me was they had an auto shop. There was 30 acres. It was in the mountains, and so I thought, you know, prison or church camp. That was just my mentality. And so that's really why I said yes to that. It wasn't that I was like, oh, I'm going to go change. I didn't think there was change and hope. I just thought this is better for a year than sitting in a jail cell.
Pastor Donnie Lytle, Family Care, he come in and was talking to me about the rehab, and he had hooked up and made contact with my mom outside of the jail. And I was in my jail cell, and I said, all right, man, I just broke. I just let it all that weight, man, I just let it go. I broke down, I cried, I prayed to God, and I said, all right, man. I said, I don't think there's any hope, you know, there is none. The world has no hope to offer a junkie. I said, you prove it to me, you know? And that was the start. That was the start.
I knew I needed to change. And I remember driving, I was in Texas when I attempted suicide. I remember my parents driving me back. I'm 23 years old in the back seat of my own car, and my mom just begging me, you know, crying, and something just switched. And I thought that I had a revelation, but now as a believer, I know that, that it was God speaking to me in that moment. And I thought, you've tried everything. You've tried heroin, cocaine, pain pills, marijuana, beer, everything just to change the way you feel. You have these feelings from when you're 18 years old and you want to get rid of them, but why don't you try something that might be good for you? And in that moment, everything changed for me. There was hope. There was maybe something can change me. Maybe I can live a different life. And I got serious about changing at that moment.
We approach the addiction process differently than some other or many or maybe even most other programs. First of all, we believe that real rehabilitation begins on the inside. There are many programs who believe that, well, you deal with the outer man first. You bring him into the program, you get him away from the drugs. You see, Josh, I can get anyone off drugs. I can lock you in a room if you're an addict and keep you in there for a week, and a week later you're going to be drug-free. Keeping you off is the key. We believe that the change must begin on the inside. On the inside, there's an emptiness, there's a void in every man's life. See, we do not believe that this is a disease. We believe that people do drugs because they are at disease with themselves. You see, by calling it a disease, that takes the responsibility off of the addict and it places it onto the disease. I can't help that I'm the way I am because I have a disease. No, you are the way you are because you made a choice. You made a choice to do drugs. You became addicted. So we believe that the inner man must change first. That comes through a relationship with Jesus Christ. Only Jesus Christ, there's an old song, only Jesus can satisfy the soul. Only Jesus Christ can fill that void in a man's heart. Man can't fill another man's void. It just doesn't happen. We do not believe that drugs are the problem in a person's life. We believe that drug abuse and alcohol abuse, that is only a symptom of problems. As you know, drugs tear down a person's thinking process. These guys stay out all night doing drugs and drinking alcohol. They don't even know how to show up for work on time, if they show up for work at all. I said, this program is going to teach them the things that they need to learn. We're going to show them how to show up for work on time, how to accept supervision. We have financial management classes on this campus. We're going to teach them how to handle their money because that's all a part of living. But the most important thing we're going to teach them is that there's a God who loves them, and there's a God who understands them, and there's a God who believes in them, and a God loves them too much to let them destroy their own lives. They like the idea that someone loves them enough to risk a friendship with them by standing up to them and saying, you're not going to be that way anymore. You're going to change today. And boy, once they catch on to that, they're in the program. And at that point, we can disciple them towards a changed, successful, functioning normally again in society individual.
Well, when they first come here, they They go through classes such as how to deal with their anger, how to deal with temptation when it comes along, how to grow through failure, because a lot of them who come here are dealing with failure in their life, you know, so they're taught how to deal with that. They're also taught how to study the Bible and how to look at the Bible from a Christian perspective. And once they go through the first level of Teen Challenge, they go into more advanced classes. And in those classes, they're dealing with more of the spiritual aspect of life and life skills and just things that'll help them. You know, as God's working on the inward person, we're teaching them life skills so they can function in society when they graduate from here.
This man walked in the room and he looked me right in the eyes and he said, "Josh, I used to break down Oxycontin and crack cocaine in vinegar, and I used to shoot it into my arm. But Jesus Christ set me free, and I'm glad you're here. He's going to do the same thing for you." And I've never heard anything like that in my life, ever. You know, I'd never heard anybody, you don't know to break down crack in vinegar unless you've done it. So I knew this guy had done it, but he was smiling and he was happy. And I'm like, if this guy's not on drugs, he has to be. You know, there's something going on. And another man walked in and said, "I used to drink myself. My liver was horrible. It was ruined. And I accepted Christ into my life and had proper training. And man, Jesus," and they were smiling. They were happy. You know, and I'm looking around and they were weird, but I wanted so bad what they had, you know. And that's when it started to click in me that, you know, I don't know what these guys got. I wasn't sure about it yet. But I want it, man. I want to be able to smile for no reason. I want to be able to look at people and just be able to say, "Man, there's hope for you." And they really meant it. You know, they really meant it. I remember they looked me in the eyes, and one of the first things I thought, they got around me and prayed for me when I got finished with my paperwork. About 40 guys. And I'm looking, it's a rough crew, you know. Some got tattoos on faces, and I mean, you can just tell they lived a rough life like I did. And they looked at me with a boldness that no drug dealer ever did, that nobody in my life ever looked at me with this sincerity in their eyes. And they knew, like, it was like they're about to pray for me, and they knew, it was like somehow they knew something was about to change in my life. That so stirred me. Just their passion for me. I'm like, you don't even know me. But they were genuinely excited to pray for me that something different was going to happen. And I walked out of that room again. It was, I felt weird. You know, I'm not used to a bunch of guys saying proud of you, love you, other than my family, my dad, you know, and stuff like that. But that's when something started to stir in me. Maybe there's something to this. Maybe there is hope.
I stayed in that word. I stayed around good people, and God started changing my heart. I was like impenetrable, man. Like I didn't have love for anybody, myself. I was just dead. And I started finding myself feeling again, having compassion, you know, having regret for the things I had done in the past. And that's when I really noticed that, man, something's changed and something's coming alive again. That heart's starting to beat again.
In December of 2009, my life completely changed. Christ moved in, and that was what I needed that whole time. That was what I filled my life with, all kinds of other things, all these drugs, and the whole time the missing link was Christ. So after he came in, he gave me a joy, even in the midst of this situation where I'm hundreds of miles away from my family and I'm around people that I don't know, but I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life. And that's something that's continued for 8 years now, you know, and I know what separates me from that sinful life and that past is Christ. It's not the amount of time, it's nothing else besides Christ's presence in my life.
I continued to change throughout the program. It was in June of 2011 that I graduated the program. And after that, I was offered, and I also completed a 3-year internship at the program. And now I'm a full-time staff member, and God has just continued to change my life every day. In September of 2014, I got married, and that was always my heart's deepest desire, was to have a loving, strong, caring, supportive husband, someone that cared for me, that was there for me, to teach me, to guide me. And he's actually a graduate from the men's program. And I'm just so thankful for what God has done in my life through this program and from Jesus Christ. I give him all the glory.
You know, I was in this church and people were rejoicing and they were celebrating, and I'm looking around like, these guys could go to jail when they leave here. You know, they're like me. They have sentences still that could be over their head. These guys are rejoicing. Some of them are crying. And you know, I just began to have this lump in my throat. And I knew something was like happening inside of me. I didn't know what it was. It was not like a drug. I just didn't know what it was. And I remember I started to pray in my mind. I didn't pray it out loud, but I'd been in church my whole life. My dad was a preacher. You know, so I remember praying and saying, God, if this is really real, and before I could even pray that, this man behind me put his hand on my shoulder and said, son, he said, if you die right now, would you go to heaven? I said, I don't know. He's like, you can know. And I dropped on my knees right there on that chair, and I gave my heart to Jesus, and I cried. One of the most amazing things about that, I was embarrassed to cry. I was scared because I'm like, you know, you don't do that out there. You don't show weakness. And when I looked up, every man that was there was around me, and they were crying, and they were happy, and they were rejoicing, and they were saying, man, welcome to the family of God, dude. Your life, this is where change starts. This is the beginning, and you just started it, man, and we're excited for you. It was at that point, man, that hope, for the first time in 12 years, longer than that, but for the first time in at least 12 years of drug addiction, that I felt like there was a chance for me to change. There was a chance for me to be the son again that my dad would look at with and be proud of. There was a chance that maybe I didn't have to put a needle in my arm ever again. There was a chance that I didn't have to drink until I passed out somewhere and didn't have a clue where I was when I woke up. There was a chance that I could be happy. And that's when hope first arose in my life. January 10th, 2007 is when it really sparked in my life that there's hope.
You know, when Christ does things, he don't do them halfway. There is no, all right, I'm just going to give you a break today, and then I'm going to give you a break tomorrow. It doesn't work that way. When he comes in, man, it's a complete transformation of your mind and your spirit, and everything within you changes. That you're not just taking the drugs out of the situation. Your heart, the way you process thoughts, everything just, it changes.
If God could move this huge mountain that was in my brother's life, why wouldn't he move it for everyone else? It's done, and he's not relapsed. I don't know of many people that can say that I didn't relapse. He did.
There is freedom, and that is Christ in my life. It's like I wake up peaceful. I don't wake up worrying about drugs. I don't worry about, you know, I know my God will supply us. That's what Christ is in my life. It's absolutely, it's a joy. I can wake up and be happy. You know, not everything's going absolutely perfect, but there's joy, there's peace, there's love. That's what Christ is in my life.
If nothing ever came of him and I, that my son was going to have his dad. And that was huge to me because I grew up without my dad really being in my life. He was in and out. He was a drug addict. So for my son to have his dad, that was huge for me.
I personally got to a place where all this got hardened and things, and I'm not in those shoes, so I think I'm somewhat better than. And that affected a lot about my life. And one of the things that it's done and it's taught me is that God loves us while we're yet sinners. It doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter what your struggle is, what your family is. God says he loves us. And what it showed me is I got to have a love for people the same way God does. So that's why, you know, actually what we do is it's all about loving people because God loves them and God cares. And I think we should care. And that's probably one of the biggest things that changed in me, where once I had an attitude, I'm not working with people like that. I'm never going to do that. Let somebody else do it. They got with their bed. They made their bed. They laid in it. But God used these circumstances to bring change to my life, where part of the greatest fulfillment I have is being able to talk with people that are broken and hurting because of addictions. You know, talking to families that are broken and being able to say, hey, guess what? There's hope. Don't ever give up. Don't ever stop praying. Now, don't ever enable them. Make them pay the price. You know, pray the hound to heaven on them. You know, but Don't ever give up on them. Don't ever give up. God loves them. God doesn't give up. And I say, as long as there's breath, we reach out to people and we let them know that there's hope, because God can change people through a relationship with Jesus that no man can ever touch. God can do that work. That's what he changed in me.
In the program, I work with the women every day. I'm very close to them. I work on their job sites with them. I'm an advisor. It's amazing to be able to reach them and tell them, I know exactly what you're going through. I do. I've been through this program. I was not raised in church, so I had no idea about who Jesus was at all. I had never read the Bible before, and so when they come to me and have questions and I'm able to help them, it's inspiring to me as well as them, because I can encourage them that, hey, even though you know nothing now, you will, and I can teach you, and this is how you learn.
And so the hope that I have now and the hope that I had at that moment, even just a month of not doing drugs, is just what's kept me. God's presence has continued to be real in my life. He's given me joy. I graduated Teen Challenge in December of 2010. I worked there for 3 years. I got married. I'm married to a pastor, and I went to college full time, and now I'm a registered nurse, and I've been working for a year, and I have a 9-month-old baby.
And simply because I've lived it and seen the testimonies of individuals that have been literally set free by the power of Christ and by faith. So I believe it's very important. I believe that our forefathers, historical evidence abounds that our forefathers believed that we needed God's help in the establishment of this nation. Why in the world would we think that we don't need the help of Almighty God in its continuation, especially in battling something like the opioid epidemic that we're currently battling? And so I believe it's vitally important. And I believe that as we continue to move in a direction that would blend faith-friendly opportunities and options to individuals who are addicted, I believe we're going to see increased success.
The reason I think faith-based intervention is so much more successful than traditional intervention is that the faith-based intervention does teach that hope and gives you that sense of community of people that you can rely on when things go bad in your life. You have that network to reach out to where without that, there's nothing beyond that regular meeting every Tuesday. They try to help the best they can, but if everybody in your group feels the same way and believes the same thing, you're family at that point. It goes beyond faith. To me, faith becomes family, and you're willing to step in and help them people out. And without that, I think it crumbles apart and falls apart.
I found my purpose. I mean, it's hard to put into words, but it's the greatest feeling ever for me personally. And once I was exposed, I firmly believe that my purpose was to get the message out there. And I've recently spoke at Columbus PD and several news outlets. God had a purpose for me that night. A, to not die, and B, to get the message out there.
That God has given us a will, and God has given us certain abilities. And so I do believe, as I said just a few minutes ago, that God expects us to do everything within our power to solve the problems and the issues that we have. And so we need to do everything we can do. But we also will recognize, as the scripture says, with men, some things are impossible, but with God, all things are possible. And so I believe that when we come to the end of our limitations, as many people do, and those who may be viewing this film are at a point where they know that they have no power, they have no strength to overcome this. The word of hope for them is that there is someone who does have strength and power to help them. And God has the power and the ability to help them. And He is willing and ready and able to reach His mighty hand out and to help lift them up. If they'll put their little hand in the big hand of Almighty God, He will be more than sufficient to help them. So there is a role for government, there's a role for individuals like myself, but there's also that place where we need the help of God. So that's the word of hope for those individuals.
there is hope. You can defeat this addiction. You can have a better life. I think when people are looking for a high, they're trying to find. They don't know what it is they're looking for. And I think if you could give them the guidance to start looking in the right direction. Sometimes people, when they find their salvation, they think that's the end. But that's not. That's just the beginning. And I think if you could provide that hope to them to start searching and seeking the right answers in the right direction.
There is a beginning point that I can say confidently, I can say boldly, and if this wouldn't work, I would quit ministry altogether. That's how bold of a statement I could say this to be. If anyone would genuinely try to open up that door and have a beginning point with Jesus Christ, try to follow out that word and have somebody help them, to apply that to their lives. I've never seen a person ever try that, genuinely try, and their life not drastically change for the better. I don't care what part of addiction they've had, whether it was meth, whether it was fentanyl, nobody. In a jail cell right now, there's men that are weeping and crying when I go week to week, that are just saying, Josh, I'm incarcerated. I've never been more free in my life. And I'm starting this path, I'm starting this journey. And it started right here in a jail cell. There was a point of beginning for me. So that point of beginning can go anywhere to anybody at any time. And that's Jesus Christ.
In terms of reason and logic, these stories and proven methods hold the answers to breaking free from the addiction of heroin. This solution is the key element that deals with the soul coming to a resolution and not a temporary fix that the world offers. Through my searching and talking with many individuals about heroin, I feel incredibly enlightened and informed how addiction can tear a man down, yet to be restored to a resilient being that is capable of revitalizing others who are afflicted. This has been a true questioning of my faith that has resulted in a complete understanding of what can truly restore the mind, body, and spirit with a small ounce of hope.
If you are searching for answers for yourself or a family member or friend, please seek help from your local faith community. Also, more information can be found at www.familycareministries.org.
I believe the best way to conclude my findings about this epidemic is from the last raw commentary from Josh Lytle, providing a gateway to hope to overcome heroin.
I've been in a place of hopelessness. I've been in a place of shame. I've been in a place of not seeing a way out of the lifestyle that I'm living. I've been in a place where I just can't see even worth living another day. But I met somebody named Jesus. And it wasn't just a picture on a wall. It wasn't just a cross tattooed on my arm. It was a man that I knew gave his life for me, that I was introduced to, that absolutely transformed my life, that took away drug addiction, that took away shame, that took away guilt, that gave me a future and a hope, that gave me a family, that gave me children, put a smile on my face, gave me the ability to be able to be sensitive and cry in front of whoever, because this isn't a sadness. This is a rejoicing that somebody was powerful enough when I felt absolutely powerless to love me in the midst of my worst. He knew me in my sin, and he loved me anyway. And there's a scripture that I love. It says, while we were yet sinners, Christ died for the ungodly. And that's what I've experienced in my life. That is my heart for every man, woman, boy, girl, elder that I meet that is struggling with this bondage, struggling with this shame, struggling in this place of hopelessness. I want to introduce them to the same thing, and his name is Jesus. And I want them to see that no matter where you're at, no matter at the worst of your worst, when I wouldn't look at my own self in the mirror when I brushed my teeth, Jesus still looked upon me, and he looked upon me with worth and with value, when I wouldn't even look at my family in the eye because I hated the man that I was, when I had to wear long sleeves in the summer because I had needle marks all up and down my arm, Christ looked at me with worth and with value, with love. Over 2,000 years ago, that was given for me, and that was also given for you. And I would just want everybody to know that they're that same hope that I have, that same life that I've experienced, this same tears of just joy and excitement. There's so much emotion in this right here because of what this man did for me, and the same can happen for you. That's what I want. That's our heart. That's my desire, is to see you accept this gift of salvation, have this point in your life. Let Jesus come down to right where you're living. You're worth it. Your life was worth dying for, worth somebody laying down their son's life for. Your life was that valuable. Accept that gift today.